All right, test. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. I'm pretty excited to be here and be able to do this. I think everybody here knows me, but I'm Collette Spears, and I'm a fifth-year senior, and I'll be graduating in 8 days with a Bachelor of Fine Arts with emphasis in ceramics, a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, and minors in Latin and Classical Culture. So I'm pretty psyched to be getting out of here pretty soon. And I'm going to be doing this lecture as a part of my honors thesis, which is also doubling as my senior capstone project for ceramics. And so that capstone project was me making a clay body work that kind of represents the culmination of my 5 years here as an undergrad. And this lecture is just a nice way of me being able to kind of make a public statement about it and talk about it so that people can know about it, I guess. But before I get into it, I want to acknowledge a few people that have been really integral to my undergrad here. So first, Ted Neal with the camera. Who's head of the ceramics area, and I've been taking classes from him for 4 years now, and he's also the advisor for the Clay Guild, and really big influence in the ceramics area. And I could list a lot of skill sets and things that I've learned, but he's really helped me to see my own true potential and empowered me to kind of go out in the world and pursue what I want to do. So that's been really great. So if you see Ted ever, give him a high five anytime you ever see him. So second, Jackie Camp, who's sitting right there, has been my therapist for 2 years now, and she's really helped me to understand myself a lot better and to help me move forward in life and work through some things that have been holding me back for a lot of years. And then Gabrielle Graber, who's been one of my best friends for a year or two now, and she's also a ceramics major in the studio, and we're both kind of high anxiety people, and so it's been really awesome to have someone who's kind of up there on my level to be able to be like, I totally know how you're feeling, but also be able to kind of look at it objectively and be like, you need to take it down a notch. So really big thank you to those people and kind of everyone who's had a hand in my undergrad experience. It's been a really great program to be in, and I'm really happy with the way that I ended up turning out at the end. So that's a win. So with this, I'm going to be kind of tracing the development of my work over the last 4 years and how certain things have turned into others, and various influences that had a play into my work, and just kind of how things have come together. And as someone who's gone through the art school system, my understanding anyway is that the point of art school, though others may not agree, is to kind of figure out where you fit in the art world. What kind of work do you want to make? What drives you? What defines you? And what are you excited about? What kind of things do you want to communicate with your work? And what's the most effective way to communicate those things? So you end up, in the beginning, you start out really broad because there's all these different media and techniques and processes, and you kind of slowly hone in on where your voice is in the art world. So you start making a lot of projects, and you kind of, occasionally you start hitting some projects. I like to call them hotspots, and I kind of made this term up. But like you make a project, and afterwards you're like, oh yeah, that was really good. I need to do more of that. And you start developing those hotspots, and over time you kind of slowly hone in on the work that drives you. And so it starts out less cohesive, and by the end, it's you kind of end up with a pretty cohesive body of work, ideally, anyway. So let's start it then. This is one of the pieces that I feel like is kind of the foundation of pretty much all of my work started with this piece. And I don't know how many of you have seen how much of my work, but if you have, you've probably seen this pattern at some point. And this cup that's like this big took forever. And if I were to do this now, I would paint the whole thing black and then carve away the non-black spots, but with this one, I painted every individual square on it. And so I would paint it and scrape away and repaint it and scrape away again and repaint it until it was perfect. And that's why it took so long, because I kind of did it wrong than I would now. But this was like the first hot spot for me. This was one of those things, even though it took forever, at the end I was like, yes, I need to do more of that, and I definitely have. And well, yeah, I did do a lot more of it. So this is just kind of a handful of things, and they're all a little different, but they're all basically variations on a checkerboard pattern. So for some reason, I seem to really like these kind of checkerboard patterns, and I think that it's really kind of driven by, I really like kind of achieving this mathematical precision by hand, and so I think I kind of like the challenge of it. So these pieces kind of served as a really nice foundation of learning how to map things out evenly and just work with things until I obtain that symmetry and balance that I really like to have in my pieces. Then this was a glass piece that I made, and you'll see on it that there is a houndstooth pattern on it. And in order to achieve that, it was sandblasted. And for those of you who don't know what sandblasting is, it's where you have a machine that blasts sand at the surface. Go figure. And so it's kind of, again, a variation on a checkerboard pattern. And so the pattern is half non-sandblasted, keeping it clear, smooth glass, and half sandblasted, and which kind of makes it frosty. So in order to do that, you have to protect and cover up the places that you don't want sandblasted. So with this one, I decided that I was going to cut out every single one of these shapes with an X-Acto knife out of contact paper, and then put them on there like stickers, and then sandblast it, and then you take the stickers off. And I really, again, it took a long time, but it was awesome. And this kind of took it a step further from the last patterns that I showed. Sorry, I'm going to end up moving the mic, and I'm going to try to keep it here. But this kind of took it a little bit of a step further, because with the checkerboard pattern, it can be a little bit off and still be fine. And with this houndstooth pattern, if it's off, it's going to start looking bad really fast. So that was just kind of something that branched off from that initial patterning that I really liked doing. And then this was the first dinner set that I made at Ball State, and it ended up being my first big commission, because I put a picture on Facebook, and my aunt was like, I'm ready to order. So she decided that she wanted 12 big plates, 12 bowls, and 16 small plates, and a couple serving dishes. And so I was like, okay, cool. And it took a year to make that. It took a really long time, because I was also doing it as a full-time student too. And what a lot of people don't realize with ceramic work, I'm gonna educate the general public a little bit right now, is that every piece that goes into a kiln is a gamble, and you can't get rid of the risk. And there's always a chance that you're going to drop something, you're going to nick something on a corner of a table, the glaze might run, stick to the shelf, the glaze is not going to look like you want. I've had shelves fall over in kiln while it's firing before, and you're always going to be losing things, and everything is not always going to come out. There's always a loss. And so in order to combat that loss, you have to make more. So instead of 12 dinner plates, I made 18. Instead of 16 small plates, I made like 30. And that's why it took a year. So just so you guys are aware, that's how that process works. But it was, even though it took a long time, it was pretty cool to be able to have this kind of production that I'd never really done before and just kind of slap things out. So it was an interesting experience, I suppose, and I did finish it, so it wasn't a total loss. And these are just some of the pictures. I would take laundry baskets of plates home over Thanksgiving and Christmas break and just sit there and carve while everyone in my family just kind of hung out. So, yeah. And then this was the second dinner set that I made, and also the last one that I made at Ball State. And I'm going to talk a little bit about where this pattern came from, and in order to do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about where I was in my life a year before I made this. So I had reached kind of one of the lowest points for me, my third year of college, and it was mostly because I never really learned how to process negative emotions, and so I ended up having a lot of years of bottled anger and grief and frustration, anxiety that I'd never really worked through, and I never really learned how to work through it. And so by the third year of college, I was just kind of bursting at the seams with this. And for almost a whole year, every day I would go to classes, come home about 9 o'clock at night, and then just cry for 3 hours through a panic attack. It was a pretty bad year. And I didn't really know what the problem was. I just knew that I was upset all the time, which is kind of weird, you know. And so I decided to start seeing Jackie. And in the beginning, it was a really overwhelming process because I never really even properly processed it the first time around and did not want to talk about it again, let alone to a stranger. And and just trying to talk about it again produced all this anxiety in me, and it was so overwhelming that I couldn't even really think clearly, and so I couldn't work through things because I was just clouded with anxiety up here. And sorry, Mike. And so I remember one of the first sessions that we went in, and Jackie was still trying to figure out like what was going on, and so she was asking, so what's bothering you? What's going on? What's the problem? And I was like, you know, my roommate, she just leaves the dishes in the sink, and I don't understand why she can't just clean them off and put them in the dishwasher. It just makes more work for later, and I don't understand why she does it, and I hate it, and that's what's wrong, and yeah, that's what's bothering me. And she was like, okay, so what's really the problem? And I was kind of like, you know, did I stutter? And obviously it was not the dishes, but when you have that much anxiety inside of you and it's so much internal energy, any little bit of external stimulation sends you over the edge. And that was kind of what the dishes were, just a daily hassle that kind of sent me over the edge. And so we kind of established that was the problem, so too much anxiety, so we need to like start working through things. And like I said, it was too much going on that I couldn't even talk about things. So as a solution, she started giving me a sheet of paper at the beginning of every session, and I would kind of hold this sheet of paper in my hands and just like fold it and move it around, do whatever I wanted, and it worked as a really great solution because it helped to channel some of that excess anxiety through my hands and kind of alleviate my mind so that I could think more clearly and communicate more effectively and start working through things. And so, I'd sit there, I'd make nice little folds and line up the corners really nicely, and they're kind of like origami with no solution, kind of. And I started saving them because they were kind of really nice. I thought that they were really nice objects and really interesting. So I started saving a bunch of them. And after I had a lot of them, I wanted to kind of look at them, and I wanted to see the connecting thread. How are these all connected with each other? And if you'll notice, when you look at them, they all have these bisected triangles, and these were kind of all over them. So I took that pattern and generalized it to this set, and just made a big pattern out of it. And which, by the way, I'm never doing this pattern ever again, because I about ripped my hand apart trying to make 6 sets of these. But this set ended up being a really big deal for me for 2 reasons. One, this was the first time that I had ever had content behind a piece before, which was a really big deal for me because I was never really a deep content-driven artist. I was always like, I make a really good plate, let's see your plate. So that was a big deal. And secondly, this was also where I kind of realized the importance of process for me in my work. And just like I call them therapy papers, just like the therapy papers kind of help to put some of that excess energy through my hands and out of my body, that's the same way that clay works, and any other kind of process like knitting, or people have seen the chainmail I've done. It's just a really great way to get energy out through my hands and increase my own quality of life for myself. So this was kind of where I made that connection, and this was a really major turning point for me as an artist in my work. And then I went into spring, where I went into hand building too. And anyone who was around me at that time knows that I did not want to do hand building. And but I had to, because it's part of my major, and so I had to come up with my own projects for these, and anyone who was there knows that I just kind of fumbled around for 2 months basically and didn't really do much, and until I finally settled on this clay weaving, which I ended up really liking. And so you can't do this with normal clay, so don't go and try to weave some baskets out of clay after this. This clay is reinforced with synthetic fibers that are wedged into it and help to make the clay stronger so that it won't break as easily, and then they fire out during the firings, so they just burn out. So now it's like normal clay. And so even though it's really different from the work that I did previously, it's also kind of similar, just because it's also a repetitive process, and there's a lot of attention to detail and craft, and yeah, I ended up really liking it. So I was glad that I did that. And so I played with size with those baskets and ended up making a pitcher and cup set. So, which I don't even know how that picture came out. That was kind of a miracle in and of itself. And then I went into summer. So this is this past summer, 2013. And this was the first summer where I did not have a job really, or like any place that I had to be for the whole summer. So I had a month and a half of liberation, and so I made a big list of things that I wanted to accomplish in the studio that I didn't really have the time to do during the school year when I was busy. And one of them was the soap dishes. And we went to St. Croix, Minnesota last May, and I found this soap dish by Sylvie Grantelli, and I was like, oh man, great idea. You know, it's perfect for carving because you have to have holes in there so that your soap doesn't get mushy, and it's just logical. So what a great idea. So I made a dozen of these and carved them all different, and it was a really great place to play around with pattern. And this is one thing I'm really looking forward to making more of in the fall when I get the time to do so. I really enjoyed making these. And these, I'm not even really sure when I started doing some of these, but this was kind of the first time playing with radial symmetry, just making some bowls and then making them carved. So you carve them out and then inlay them with black slip and then scrape the slip off the surface so it stays in there, and you kind of have this black patterning that you have in there. And much like the soap dishes, also looking forward to making more of these in the fall. So, and then I spent the second half of my summer as a work-study educational assistant at Airmont School of Arts and Crafts in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And Airmont is a super legit place. It is a big craft school, and they have all different kinds of media that you can do there, from wood, clay, fiber, drawing, painting, photography, metal. They have stone carving for a week or two during the year. And from, I think it's April till October, they put on 1 to 2 week workshops. So you can, like anybody can pay to go there, and you basically spend a week learning a craft under a major figure within their field. And it's a really great time because, one, you get to be in this big community of people who just want to make art, and meet people from all over the country that come and do these. And secondly, meals are provided and your bed is there, and you don't have to worry about a job. So really your only focus that you have to worry about is making art and learning how to do a process. So it's kind of a vacation for some people. Some people use it as a vacation. These are some pictures from there. There were a lot of assistants there, so we made friends, and like that picture up there at the top was we put on a garden soiree party. So we dressed up really fancy and just had a garden soiree. And this picture down here was from my first workshop that I took there, because part of my payment for being an assistant there was that I got to take 3 workshops, which I'll tell you is a really sweet deal. So I took this wood turning workshop, and so we learned how to turn these wooden bowls on lathes. And you'll notice that everyone in that class, except for one other woman, were old men. So it's just a whole class full of old men, and all they did all week was complain about their wives and tell underwear jokes. And it was one of the best weeks that I could have asked for. And I ended up firing their salt and soda kiln down there, which was a good experience because it's very different from the kilns that we have here. And if you know anything about the kilns here, you know that Ted builds half of them, and Ted is kind of the master kiln builder of America or whatever. So you know, people pay him to come around and build kilns for their universities or craft centers, and so because he builds them perfect and level and square, and every brick is perfectly in place. And most kilns are not like that. Most kilns are a little jank because they are really expensive, so you're obviously not going to get a new kiln all the time. And Airmont's kiln is a little jank. So it was a good experience to fire that for once and not fire a perfect kiln for once. And I kind of rebuilt the door right after loading, because I was like, this is the most ghetto door I've ever seen in my entire life. And so their door looks a lot better now. This is one of the pieces that came out of that firing. It ended up being good firing. I was really pleased with it. And so this was a piece that I made there last summer, just working with line work and balance. And this was the last piece that I made at Airmont, also coming out of that kiln. And okay, so right now we're officially going to go into the double-walled section of this. And for the next like 4 slides, I'm going to be jumping around dramatically, chronologically. So I'm going to keep you updated as I go, but I'm just warning you, so pay attention. So I made this at Airmont, and made that at Airmont. This was the first one that I made at Ball State, and I made this back in 2012, and this was also a hot spot for me. After I made it, I was really happy with it, and I was like, I really want to make more of these, but they take so long to do, so I never had the opportunity to make any more. So this whole double wall thing for me was it was a hot spot. I knew that I wanted to delve into it more. And this was the first one that I made in high school. Cindy Hussar back there was the high school teacher, and she's here today. And I remember, I think it was probably probably the last semester, because I remember being like, feeling like I had mastered everything, and I wanted something new to do, because I already knew how to do everything. So she suggested this double wall thing, and so I was like, yes, challenge accepted. So I made that, which, it is what it is, but it it led the way for kind of the whole body of work that I have now, because I'm not sure that I would have even really thought about this idea if she hadn't suggested that 5 years ago. So that happened. Then we're gonna jump again. This was made the same time that I made those soap dishes, so the beginning of last summer. And okay, so what do you notice when you look at that and that and that? They're all kind of this cylindrical, boxy, there's very little deviation. They all look the same. And I came back from Airmont and I looked at this again, and I was really disappointed with it. And this piece is really significant because it's not significant. Got it? Just I felt really limited and boxed in kind of with these throne vessels. And so coming up to fall, hand building 3, I decided that I was going to start coil building these. And which was really great, because I ended up having a lot more flexibility with it. And after a lot of trial and error and problem solving, I ended up making pieces like this, which I could not make this on a wheel. The tension would just kind of self-destruct, basically. So when you do pieces like this, there's a lot of risk, again, that goes into these. And your biggest enemies with these are gravity and drying. So gravity, because that inner form is basically only being supported by the rim, so it's just kind of levitating in there. And then drying, because once you start carving the outside, it's getting drier by the second, and you can't dry enough to support itself, but not dry enough that it's you can't carve it, because you have to carve it. Well, I have to carve it anyway. I'm not going to leave that uncarved, obviously. This was another piece that came out of that semester. I really like this jar a lot, and although you can't see it, it has a lot of problems. So yeah, I'm hoping to make another one of these and have it be actually successful at some point. But this is about 13 inches tall, so this was a pretty big form. And again, when you're fighting gravity, size increases the risk of cracks and self-destruction. So, but I really liked the carving on it. And I don't know, these forms are just really nice to explore the different carvings that I want to work through. And speaking of carving, with process, carving itself has also taken some problem solving. Yeah, so when I carve a piece, at this point I carve all the pieces but leave them in. And then I take them all out at once. And this does two things. One, like I said, once you start taking chunks out, things start drying dramatically more quickly. And so by leaving them in, you can still carve the whole thing and not have one side be drier than the other side before it catches up. And secondly, when you're inserting a knife into these to carve these, it kind of spreads apart the two walls on either side, and that small movement, even though I purchased surgical scalpels to do this, so I try to get as thin as possible, but it still moves them enough. So having those chunks in there kind of keeps those walls in place and keeps them from moving too much. So that's the way that I carve things. And this was the last piece that I made at the end of last semester. So this is where my thesis work commences. And that's where I leave you with my clay work, so hopefully I've piqued your interest to come tonight to the opening. Although I think probably all of you are coming tonight anyway, except for Cindy, because I know she can't. Yeah, so this is kind of where I leave the ceramic work, and I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple other projects that I was doing this semester. They're also going to be at the living room tonight, so you can see them as well. But I also did a creative project for departmental honors in art, and so with that I decided that I wanted to research and focus in on a couple antiquitous processes that have become really obsolete today. And so one of them, I decided to finish the chainmail that I started back in October 2012. And chainmail, you know, was a middle-aged armor used to prevent stab wounds, although the copper is not going to protect you from anything, so don't get stabbed if you are wearing my chainmail. And it was also a very labor-intensive process because at one point wire didn't really exist, so they had to make their own wire, and did so by cutting strips of sheet metal, heating them up and rolling them to make their own wire, and then making their own rings from the wire, putting them together, and then riveting every single ring. And I picked and chose the things that I wanted to do with it. So I made my own rings, but you know, I'm not going to make my own wire. I'm sorry. And these are some process shots of the kind of station that we set up to mass produce these rings. And there's about 25,000, I think, in the thing, and I tried to keep count anyway, but so I think it's around there. So we got a drill and some wooden dowel rods, and by spinning the drill, it was really easy to wrap the wire really quickly, and then I would just cut them down with a Dremel. And so this was a great way to just mass produce hundreds of rings at a time. And then, and then these are some process shots of the actual chainmail, putting it together. And in the beginning, I was putting it together ring by ring, and I was like, God, this sucks. And then I saw online that there's this thing called speed weaving. So that's what the pictures are of. You kind of, speed weaving is putting 3 rings on at a time so that you kind of get these clusters of 3 rings, and then you connect the clusters with individual rings. So you make 2 rows at once, and it's really speedy. And then I sat like this the whole time that I did it. So I'm pretty happy to have, you know, a functioning neck still. So that's also a win from my undergrad. And then I also decided that I wanted to research Navajo weaving. And we don't have a fibers department here at Ball State. I kind of wish that we did, but we don't. And so we don't have looms here. So I made my own loom and set this up in my bedroom. And I liked the weaving because the patterns are kind of similar to the kind of patterns that I do. They're very angular, and there's a lot of repetition and symmetry and balance in their weavings. And also, it is, like the chainmail, a very grueling process with, you know, the shearing of the sheep and carding of the wool and spinning the wool and dyeing yarn. And I did not shear my own sheep. I bought it at Joann's Fabrics. But I attempted to dye some yarn, but it didn't work because it was acrylic yarn, and apparently the acrylic yarn just kind of repels dye, so I didn't quite get that. But this unfortunately did not get finished in time for the exhibition today, but I just brought the whole loom into the gallery. So I think that it's not a bad trade, because I think it's kind of neat to be able to see it on the loom before it's cut off and kind of be able to see the process of it. So it's over halfway done though, and I think it looks pretty good, so I'm pretty happy with it. And this isn't a reproduction by any means. I looked at a lot of books and a lot of pictures of Navajo weaving and kind of took those things and designed my own Navajo-inspired serape. And yeah, looks good. these are some pictures of the loom as I was putting it together. And so for weaving, you have to put the warp on there, which are the vertical strings there. And this took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. This took 8 hours to put this together. So this was a full day's work. And well, because you have to, there's so many strings on it. I think there's 100 strings across. I think I counted. I think there's over 100. And when you put it together, you have to make sure none of them are tangled, make sure they're all equally spaced, and make sure there's the balance of tautness across the whole thing. And it was kind of ridiculous, but it looked good at the end, so I was pretty happy with the loom. And oh, and also, I mean, this was also made after, it was modeled after the Navajo looms. So basically, you take away the perfectly planed pine wood from Lowe's, and you put in basically tree branches, and that was what the Navajo were using. So it was also kind of cool to be able to integrate that part of the Navajo into my experience of it. And then these are some close-up shots of some of the weavings, and you can see it's not just back and forth, normal weaving. Some of these take a lot of planning to do, and to make sure that you get the height versus the width looking how you want it. And it takes a while. You can see that there's a picture of a sewing needle there. That's how I've been doing most of it, is with a sewing needle. So it will be done this summer before I move to Texas. So, because I'm not taking this loom anywhere with me. And so if we're friends on Facebook, you can probably see the end of it. If not, then sorry, you might not see it then. And I wanted to kind of conclude with talking about a part of being an artist that I think is really important for success, and kind of critical to not only being an artist, but also to living a fulfilling life as a person. And so I wanted to springboard into this with a quote. And I'll be the first one to say, wow, Collette, quotes in a presentation, so cliche, but that's okay. So our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightening about shrinking so that other people won't feel unsure around you. As we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And I wanted to kind of start by saying that to make artwork publicly is it's really scary, and I'm not talking about financially scary as I can be, but psychologically. For me to stand up here and talk about what I think, and to show my artwork to people and allow people to judge and evaluate it is really frightening, because nobody wants to be told that they suck at art. And when you put your heart into something, it's really easy to start feeling like your work is a part of yourself, and if your art sucks, then that must mean that you suck as a person too. And I almost kind of think that the art world sort of encourages this, because we don't necessarily say, I finally saw a painting by Claude Monet. We usually say, I finally saw Claude Monet, even though you didn't, because he's dead, but we say that anyway. And so I know that not everyone here is an artist, so I will extend that to business people in Orlo. And my understanding is that business people are prized for their creativity and innovation and ability to come up with new ideas, things that haven't been done, and things that haven't been thought of before. And in order to do that, you have to be willing to put yourself out there and put your ideas out there. It's very similar to putting your artwork out there, and because someone's going to say whether your idea is good or bad. And again, I think it's really easy to start to internalize evaluation of your ideas as evaluation of yourself. And I think that can become a really detrimental mindset to have. And I'm going to extend it one more time so that everyone in this room can feel included, to all people. And I think that a really important part of being a person and having a fulfilling life is being able to be vulnerable in front of other people and reach out to other people in order to kind of establish that connection with them. And so, examples would be crying in front of someone, or telling someone that you have feelings for them, or saying "I love you" first. Oh, Jackie's so proud of me right now. And or to admit to someone that you have a problem. And all of these things kind of put you out there so that you potentially can be judged really harshly by other people. And but those things are our daily life. Those aren't special occasions, those are daily life. And it just kind of goes to show that we live in a really vulnerable world, and there's no guarantees that all of your ideas are gonna get an A+ and a gold star. And there's always gonna be someone to tell you that you're not skinny enough, not rich enough, not talented enough, not fast enough, not good enough. And I think that our fear of being wrong or belittled or inferior is what stops us from taking these risks and moving forward. And I think that we also do a disservice to the world and to ourselves if we let our self-worth be dictated by what other people, by the judgment of other people. And if we don't allow people to really see us or to see our talents, I think it's a really big loss. And how could we possibly move forward as a society if everyone was too scared to share their ideas? So to bring this full circle, my work kind of brings my own struggles with generalized anxiety out to the open so that I can feel more comfortable talking about them and feel more accepting of myself having those struggles. And I think that there's a lot of people in the world who don't put their struggles out there and kind of keep them inside like a shameful secret, and hoping that nobody's ever going to discover their secret, that they're not perfect. And I think, at the same token, it's really hard to be okay with yourself when you do things like that, when you keep those things inside. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to be like me, but I think that liberation from fear is a really good thing to strive for. And I'm still trying to internalize it on a daily basis, but I think it's made me a stronger person for it. And so I guess I'm hoping that my liberation from fear will help to liberate other people to feel more comfortable expressing themselves. And I hope that all of you will share your artwork and your opinions and your ideas, because your playing small does not serve the world. So, thank you. So everyone I know is aware, but the opening tonight is 6 to 8 p.m. at the living room, and hopefully you are interested enough that you want to check everything out. And it's not just me, it's going to be a group showing of all the graduating ceramics majors and one metals major who's graduating. So it's going to be a great show, and we'll have a lot of food. Does anyone have any questions or anything? No? All right. Thank you very much for coming. I guess that will be it.